Okay, great. Well, Corey, thank you so much for this. This is such a good idea. It's so important for us as members of WABJ, as members of this organization, to hear directly from managers. Um, I'm going to jump right in. And Krissah, I'm going to start by asking you, you got elevated to this position at a challenging time for Black journalists and the media industry in general. Did you ever see yourself taking on this leadership role at the Post or at another new outlet?
Thank you for the question, Eva. Thank you, Corey, for the invitation. I'm glad to be with you all. It's been a minute since I've been to a WABJ meeting, but I was once a member in good standing, so I feel right at home with you. Um, I I think you're right. I'm sure you have experienced it in your newsrooms. It is a challenging time for journalists generally, and for journalists of color, and for Black journalists. I will say, um, early in my career at the Post, would I have predicted that I would be in this position? Probably not, but I really did feel after, not just the summer of kind of reckoning in our newsroom and throughout our nation, but the sense that knowing the institution and having being a part of it for 20 years, that I could affect some change and do good. And I could see some of the areas where we needed to make progress, where we needed to create some new career pathways for people, where we could do a better job with our recruiting pipeline. Really sort of getting a vision for what some of those changes could be, and understanding that creating an institution that uh, really values diversity and inclusion and has a culture of belonging is not just one person's job, but it had to be a shared imperative throughout, you know, the leadership. I got a sense that that is where we were beginning to prioritize that as a newsroom, in a way that we hadn't in many, many years. And I think I saw Joe Davidson's name on here earlier. There are many journalists and Black journalists who played a major part just in conceiving of a role of the type that I am currently in. 6, 7 years ago, made the proposal that this should happen, and this was something that the Washington Post uh, needed. And so I'm happy to bring my voice to the table with other senior leadership at the Post. And I really do think of this role as being multifaceted. So it's about coverage, our news coverage on a day-to-day basis. It's about jobs, how we think about hiring and recruiting. And it's also about the culture of the newsroom, and uh, creating the kind of place where once we are able to hire people from diverse backgrounds, they feel like they can impact the institution and are included in the institution.
It's such a unique role, to have what seems like, and jump in if I'm mischaracterizing it, but it seems like it's both a human resources job and also an editorial role, like it's kind of hybrid. Is that right? And that's unique in newsrooms.
That is true. Our newsroom, and not every newsroom is that way. We run our hiring shop. So we have human resources and they help us with the back end, but in terms of the recruiting, promotion, all of that sort of thing, that is done by our newsroom managers who are closer to the work. And so, yes, the job is very much involved in coverage, pitching, thinking about lines of coverage and projects, being involved with some of our most important work, and also being interviewing every job candidate who comes through, and introducing hiring managers to potential candidates. And there are more of these kinds of roles at media organizations. They're set up differently in different places. So around the same time that I got my job, that I was promoted, the Dallas Morning News created a that Lenora Allen is currently in, but her title is deputy publisher. So she sits across both the biz side and the newsroom, and it has an outward facing role and an inward facing role. And so you would have to you have to take a look at the way the jobs are set up. I think the aims are very much the same, and it's an important impetus. And the hard work we've been talking about as an industry for many years, and diversified throughout our ranks in ways that we just haven't.
So you began at the Post as an intern. Quickly sort of walk us through all the positions that you've had and maybe how many years you were in each so that people can get a sense if they're starting out in print, how long they can expect to sort of rise up if they're aspiring to get to where you're at.
Well, you're going to test my memory because it was a lot of different positions. I will say, so, trying to be strategic, like as a young reporter, when I applied to the Post internship, I decided to apply as a business intern. So I interned for our financial section. I was a Chips Quinn scholar. I was a Dow Jones newspaper fund internship recipient. So I had some experience in business reporting. And so that was the desk that I was hired on to. I learned to read SEC filings, but I also wrote lots of profiles. And my first job after the summer when I was hired on was in Prince George's County covering business. And I worked in the bureau in Prince George's County. So I wrote about minority business writ large and also immigrant-owned businesses. And I did that probably for 3 years or so. Came to the downtown office and had a job that was more focused on immigrant-owned businesses, and was able to travel to Central America to write about some of the ties between the business community there and immigrant communities in the Washington, D.C. area. That was probably another year or two doing that. And then in the fall of 2007, I went over to the national staff, and the campaign staff always grows right before an election. And so I covered voters during the 2008 campaign cycle, which, I felt like that campaign just kind of spoiled me for political coverage because people were just so engaged no matter where I popped up in the country. They had really strong ideas about where we needed to go and what that campaign meant and who the candidates were. I did that, came back, did some coverage of race and civil rights. And then one day an editor called me up, said, we need somebody to, we got a spot on the plane for the First Lady. She's going to South Africa. Do you want to be our pool reporter on that? And I was like, yes, I will go. So I covered that trip of Michelle Obama's and never let go of the First Lady beat. And so along with doing profiles and enterprise stories, I wrote about her from 2012 until 2018, and then covered the first year of the First Lady's office in the Trump administration. And then I moved on over to editing, which I've really enjoyed. I didn't realize how much I was ready to be doing something else. It just turned on a different part of my brain. I loved management. I loved thinking with reporters about their stories. I still felt really close to the work and to some of the struggles of being a reporter in a high energy newsroom, and was, you know, uh, really took to that work. And then, about 3 years later, this opportunity came about. And because of both the moment that we were in, I think also my love for the Washington Post and the people of our newsroom, it was a job that I wanted to take on. And so it kind of went like that. And along the way, there were many moments. Sorry, my daughter just popped in, but she's gone. Okay. Along the way, there were many moments where someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Have you thought about, you know, moving to this section, or have you thought about doing this, or here's a project. Why don't you sit in on this meeting?" And so it really was a matter of, taking opportunities when they came along, but also, for me, burrowing deep in a place where I could do a totally different job every 3 or 4 years and still grow and, be challenged and, continue to do compelling work.
It sounds like they have really supported you very well there. I know that the Post announced last year that it's creating 150 new jobs this year. Where does that stand right now? How many of these will be editorial jobs, and how many openings are you currently seeking to fill? So,
Mhm.
job seekers on this call eagerly wanting some answers on that.
Yes, of course, of course. Good question. Let's get down to the real business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we are growing. Our newsroom just crossed over the 1,000 mark, which is a big newsroom. You know, I should say, throughout the course of the period of time that I was just describing, we got down to a place where we had contracted about 580 employees. We went through some dark days like many news organizations, but have grown back up again. And so out of those 150 jobs, a lot of those jobs are in engineering or on the business side, because obviously we need engineers to support the site and do all the cool bells and whistle work that we do. But about 40 of those jobs, give or take a few, are in the newsroom. Some of them were announced late last year, and um, so those postings have closed. Those are part of our global expansion, where we are creating a live news hub in Sydney, Australia, and one in, I'm sorry, the live news hub is in London and in Seoul, Korea. And so we're adding about 6 people in each of those places, basically to create a kind of handoff where when we are going to sleep in the US and London, they will pick it up. And so that we can have a more seamless 24/7 cycle. We also are expanding our foreign staff with correspondents in Sydney, Australia, and Bogota, Colombia. But then building what we consider to be another pillar of coverage for us, expanding our personal tech coverage. And so there are a handful of jobs that will be posted in the coming weeks, covering personal tech. And then, like many news organizations, we continue to have churn. So there are always openings. We are hiring for a congressional reporter right now. I'm not sure if that posting has closed yet, but that's an opening that's active. We just reposted a job covering race and ethnicity that's based on our national staff. We have a couple of openings for assignment editors on various desks in the newsroom. And so um, there, I should have had it at the ready, but I'll pull up before the conversation ends and share the site of our current active openings. The other thing that I'm hoping to do is just to create, especially since we're in this Zoom environment, more interaction between potential and interested candidates for jobs and hiring managers. And so I'm working with the national offices of NABJ, NAHJ, and AAJA to set up some forums. Oh, thank you so much, Corey. There it is. To set up some forums to do that, because careers are long, and even if the opening isn't there, if there's not, a perfect match in that moment, having the conversation now, getting the coffee now, allows us, when the perfect job is open, when that opportunity is there, to have a relationship built, to know one another, for you to know the hiring manager in the area that you're interested in, and to stay in touch over time. And so I'd like to see us do more of that. And especially, I mean, with this chapter, our jobs are still primarily based um, in the Washington metro area. You will see that on our posting. We've gotten more flexible in terms of thinking through, is this a job that can be done remotely, and offering that opportunity from time to time. But even in this environment, we understand the value of our newsroom in coming together. And so, you have an advantage in that way. You're here.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then if other folks would like to ask questions, maybe you can just you can maybe send me a message on the chat, or you could send it to everyone on the chat, and then I could maybe call on you, just so that we don't have a bunch of folks trying to ask a question at the same time. I could maybe call on a couple people, because we have Krissah until 7:40. As a hiring manager, Krissah, what are some things that have worked really well for recent candidates? So if you think of a person you just hired, what did they do really well to get the job in the application process? And then on the flip side, what are sort of your biggest pet peeves, turnoffs, things that you maybe were considering someone for a position and then you went in a different direction?
Well, for us, and this is, I'm thinking of reporting and editing jobs here. Obviously, we hire, and I didn't mention that we're expanding our Instagram team on the audience to create even more of an impact with our accounts there. So we have lots of different kinds of jobs, but I think it is still very much an industry and at the post where we want to see your clips, we want to see your work, we want to see evidence that you can come to our high octane newsroom and be confident that you can do the work. And sometimes that means having a conversation before your clips are there, to talk about what it is we're looking for. And again, that is the beginning of establishing a long relationship. Um, some of the hires that I can think of, um, there were people who maybe have freelance for a particular editor, and so again, establish that relationship. And when that editor had an opening, they knew exactly who they wanted to hire because they already knew that candidate. I think, to the extent that you can, and I'm happy to help facilitate this, is having an early conversation with the hiring manager to talk about what the role is and what your strengths are. This is not, we're not talking about the interview phase, but just having those preliminary coffees to get to know people. I think that is also important. And then definitely at the interview stage, to show up with confidence, with a sense of what your ideas are, but more than anything, for writing positions, to write a really strong memo. I think that still carries a lot of weight in terms of what are your ideas. Where do you think that you can have an impact? What differentiates you? All of those things are really important, but a lot of it will show up in your clips. And if you're if you're already done the kind of work that you're hoping to do, then it's a much easier sell in terms of saying to a hiring manager, this is what I can do at your shop.
Thank you for that. Well, Joe Davidson wants to ask a question. So, Joe, if you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I first wanted to say welcome, Krissah. I'm so glad you're here. So glad that you're in the position you're in at the Post. I'm wondering if you have any demographic information regarding the number or percentage of Black journalists on the staff at the Post, and if you have that broken out by position, particularly how many editors, upper level editors, or the percentage of upper level editors are Black. And the second question is, for years, some of us have tried to get the Post to attend the NABJ conferences and set up a table in the jobs fair, as it did a while ago, but it stopped at some point. And whenever we would raise it, they would say, well, Kevin Merida, who was the former managing editor, suggested that it really wasn't that worthwhile because that's not the kind of people who are attracted to the tables, aren't the kinds of experienced people that the Post might want to hire. But some of us have responded that it's not just a hiring mechanism, it's a matter of being present and kind of waving the flag, so to speak, to let people know that the Post is very interested in supporting organizations, specifically the NABJ, but also the other sister organizations. So my question on that point is, do you think the Post at some point will return to NABJ, and I assume the other organizations, with a visible presence, as opposed to simply being in a suite somewhere?
I'll take your first question first. I don't have the demographic data at my fingertips, but for the first time last summer, the Post released, and it's publicly available, the demographic data both for the entire company and for the newsroom. And it doesn't break it down job by job, but it does look at managers and then the entirety of the staff. And for the company as a whole and the Post newsroom, we're woefully underrepresented in terms of leadership, and not as represented as we should be in terms of the staff as a whole. And so one of the things that I've been focused on is really thinking through how, on a team by team level and throughout every strata, we can work to rectify that, both in the hires that we make and as we think about how people can chart career paths throughout the newsroom. So I'm keeping an eye on those numbers. I mean, I'm not in a position to share them all as I look at them every month, but they will be released again this coming summer, and we'll have a baseline with which to see, are we making progress? I mean, I can tell you, just in terms of filling jobs in the 6 months that I've been in the roles, I'm really excited about some of the hires that we've made and the work that they will do, I think, to both, bring perspective, more nuance and depth to our coverage. A lot of them are just getting started in their positions. I think that's going to be great. But at the same time, we've lost talent. And so being able to retain some of our really sharp journalists of color is also something that we have to grapple with. And then what was the second question? Oh, okay, the booths.
Right.
Yeah, I like I mentioned, I'm meeting with the leadership of the big three organizations in the coming weeks, and I want to talk to them about some of the job openings that we do have and just creating more of a pathway there. But I've also been pushing to make sure that we're supportive of the organizations in other ways. Are we, buying tables at the awards banquet for each of the groups? We should be. And I'm not sure that we've done that consistently in recent years. And I know for NABJ, having a table at the job fair is really important in terms of exposure. I think for some of the other organizations, there are other ways we may invest in terms of supporting. And so I'm going to kind of take that on a case by case basis for each group, but that is definitely in the realm of sort of what I'm thinking as we approach conventions again this summer, which maybe we'll get to do in person. I don't know. Maybe
NABJ already announced it's going to be virtual.
did they? Okay.
Yeah, so
They
maybe,
did.
so
Yeah.
maybe next year. But anyway, thank you very much. I'm very glad you are where you are. And however.
Thank you, Joe. I'm here in part because of you and others like you who paved the way. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, wish you the best and let us know how we can help.
Appreciate you.
Juliet Beverly has a question. And also, Krissah, if you could go ahead and put your email address in the chat.
Oh, sure.
People want to know how to get a hold of you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Juliet.
Hi, Krissah. Thanks for your time today, and congratulations on the new role. I just wanted to get a comment from you regarding the retirement of Marty Barron and how you see your role fitting into fulfilling some parts of the legacy that he's left for the post, but also what you hope to build, because resignations and retirements don't always mean a permanent loss, but they can be opportunities. So I wanted to get your comment on that.
Sure. Yes, there was big news in our newsroom today. Our executive editor of the past 8 years announced his retirement effective February 28th. And I think that's something that we're all grappling with. As I mentioned, having been at the Post for 20 years, there were some days before Marty became executive editor and Jeff Bezos purchased the Washington Post, where we were cutting staff left and right from all kinds of positions. And it felt like our ambition was shrinking, and that turned around. I told him earlier, I really had the sense of when things change and we got our swag back, you could feel it in the newsroom. And that was really exciting to be a part of. And we could just think about the ambitious journalism that we wanted to do. And I think that's the footing that we're on now. And we're also in a space where, in addition to that, we can think about, culture and some of our priorities around diversity and inclusion and invest in those. And that's what we're doing. And I want to see that continue to move forward, even under new leadership. And we'll see what opportunities, lie ahead.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's end with Kevin Childs, who has a question.
Yes, Krissah, thank you for joining us this evening. I wanted to follow up on something you mentioned just a few moments ago in people applying for positions and the importance of having a strong memo to make the case for themselves, and particularly if their background is a fit for the position that they're going for. My question is, what about if your career history is not in line with what you're going for? If you're trying to make a transition, say from business writing to politics writing, how do you help yourself make the case to those managers who you're applying to?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, Kelvin. I mean, I would say that is tough in part because at a place like the Post, these jobs are so competitive. And so you will have a lot of people who have the exact experience for the job. And I think, again, that is a place where you want to be able to get someone on the phone, have a conversation, express either through your memo or through that conversation why this transition makes sense for you and what you feel like you're bringing from the experience that you have to the new role. Quite frankly, that's often easier for people who are already in the newsroom to do, for someone to transition from being a reporter on one staff to a reporter on another staff, even if they don't have the exact commensurate experience, because they're more of a known quantity within the newsroom. And so in thinking strategically, it may make sense to first apply and be a really strong candidate for a position in an area where you already show up as a very strong candidate versus trying to make that jump from the outside, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So we are just at 7:40 right now, but we have a couple more questions. So I'm hoping, Krissah, just to be respectful of the schedule, if you could maybe answer those questions in the chat.
Okay. Yeah.
The question one comes from Tyrena Evans. She wants to know if the Washington Post has a fellowship for early career journalists who are recent college graduates. So if you could go ahead and answer that in the chat. And then also, if you could maybe talk about the editorial strategy moving forward. Do you see these questions here, Krissah?
I can scroll up and try to get them. I know you need to.
There's Cassie to everyone.
I see that one, and I see Denise. So I'll answer the first one and then those two.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time this evening. This has been really helpful. Okay. Krissah's email is in the chat. So if you also want to follow up with Krissah individually, so amazing that she has this hybrid role where she's both in charge of hiring, but also the editorial content to make sure it's increasing diversity on both fronts. So we're so appreciative of your time. We're so glad to have you in our community. And thank you much. I'm going to turn it back over to WABJ President Corey.
Thank you, Eva. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you, Eva and Krissah. I appreciate both of you. So hello, guys. If you're just joining, thank you for joining our first general body meeting of the year. I hope you guys enjoy